During the turmoil of the Great War in 1915, Grande gave birth to a boy who would become one of Hungary's noted modern artists, Zoltán Glatter.
When I was 4 years old, my father and mother parted. I've been given to my grandfather and family, where later on my grandfather kept my supervision of my art, and these give me the incentive later on to be an artist myself.
With his father dying from Spanish flu and his mother remarrying to Count Felix Pellegrini, an Italian aristocrat, Zoltán and his grandfather shared a large mansion with 25 other artists and their families. Zoltán learnt from these artists, especially Gardos, a sculptor, while his grandfather continued to set him tasks.
My grandfather started to teach me very young age started me to teach. He put it there, plaster figures of famous artists' copies, and these what I have to draw with charcoal. This was my beginning of contact with fine art. But it made me so excited, I definitely decided I'm going to be also an artist, like the rest of the family, basically.
In the mansion, Zoltán used to help Gardos, building up the sculptures and learning the profession. Gardos was awarded the gold medal by the French Royal Academy. An agent for Adolf Zucker was looking for a sculptor in Hungary to build a statue in his birthplace, Rishka. Being a Hungarian Jew, Adolf Zucker emigrated to America and founded and owned Paramount Pictures. Adolf's agent chose Gardos and awarded him the commission. He conferred with Zoltán on various ideas, and they decided to represent peace with a life-size statue of a shepherd, 2 sheep, and a goat. Zoltán suggested that one of the sheep should be jumping, so Gardos let him model it while he modeled the rest. At the age of 18, Zoltán had finished his education at the respected school of the Humanistic Protestant Church, studying, amongst other things, Latin and Greek for the 8 years he was there. His grandfather had died that year, and Zoltán joined the Royal College of Fine Arts in Budapest in 1934. Upon finishing 2 years later, Zoltán then moved to Paris and joined the famous Julian Academy. It was here that he started to meet other well-known names and artists.
Paris, I used to collect my money from Hungary coming in a bank, Boulevard Haussmann. One occasion when I collected my money, I could hear in the neighborhood Count Tolstoy or Marquis Tolstoy. It hit me because Tolstoy is a very famous name. So I went to him very modestly and told him I am a Hungarian artist, and I heard many of Tolstoy. Are you related to the famous Leo Tolstoy, the writer? He said, yeah, I am the first son of his. I am withdraw myself here in Paris. I left my country, and my younger brother supplied me with money to survive because he is a great friend of Stalin. See, he was a great friend. This is very exciting information. Then we walked further, then sat in a coffee, been very interested about the Hungarian situation, and he told me, I guarantee you, in our lifetime, it won't be changing the situation in Russia or all over the world regarding the communism. I said him back, I hope it still won't be like this. Then later we've been talking, I mentioned him another occasion. I've seen in the museum a Van Dyck portrait which is absolutely identical with your face. Then I brought him the next time a photo of it, and he was telling, he couldn't believe himself, identical, the face and everything. So he offered me, now go on and make me a portrait, paint me. And this was my opportunity to take this very famous gentleman.
Zoltan was at the Julian Academy from 1936 to 38. The building comprised one level in large grounds. Zoltan was surprised at the financial difficulties some of the artists had and the wasted talents because of it.
Julian Academy studio was a very large studio base. On one side worked the sculptors, on the other side the painters and graphic artists. The student number was more or less 50, generally. Outside garden was very untidy. Rubble of broken, unfinished sculptures was there visible. I noticed later on a very famous works of a famous artist work who couldn't pay the fee and the price of the material what he used. He couldn't take it home.
Zoltan and his friends used to meet at a cafe to paint portraits of local people and tourists. They made a reasonable living from this. It paid for their wine and food, giving them time to talk of new ideas and dreams. Their bohemian lifestyle offered many new experiences.
One occasion, a colleague came to me and very excited told me he has an invitation to a very famous modern artist, Van Dongen, to visit. He's going to have a classical evening for artists. They have classical background. Asked me if I would like to join him. I was delighted because I would have been very interested in the museum's Van Dongen art portraits. So to see him personally was a great honor to me. We had to hire classical clothes, and with taxi, the right time we arrived to his studio. He was a very middle-sized gentleman. He was very friendly, shook our hands, and then I have seen very strangely dressed ladies, transparent togas and other classical dresses, including the gentlemen. We joined a group. They've been discussing portraits of Van Dongen. We stood there underneath, and I've been listening with my limited French what they discussion. Luckily, my friend been born in Paris, and he could tell me in details, summed up what this famous artist spoke about the various portraits. Of course, for me, these portraits been entirely new in modern art, because under the Royal Academy style, unfortunately, was more stiff. And these portraits pretend to be moving and lovely color scheme. This was very exciting for me, and I realized from now on I must follow this type of art.
With new ideas in style, Zoltan went to Italy, to the Accademia Bell'Arte, an art school in Florence. But after a year, once again, Europe fell into the madness of war. In 1939, Zoltan was called up in the Hungarian army. In the first year, he was joined to the officer school for 6 months and became a sergeant. By 1940, he had a distinction and trained new recruits and was promoted to second lieutenant. In 1941, he joined the 2nd Tank Division as a war correspondent, writing for and speaking on Gabor Aran radio, mainly against the Romanian fascist leader Antonescu. On one occasion in Budapest, the local papers told the public there was going to be an air raid alarm practice with strict instructions for silence before the scheduled time of 6 o'clock. Zoltan was on duty that day. The commander, being impatient, then told Zoltan to initiate the alarm call. As the bells started to chime, sirens, car horns, and other bells sounded out all over the city in response. They then realized they had broken the 6 o'clock order.
I was very worried and went up, reported to the general. We created a big mess here because we should not allow to make any noise. He was also amazed, and after all, we couldn't do any more. We kept quiet about it because next day the newspapers reported some criminals caused trouble. So we had to put up a new trial.
With the Germans occupying much of northern and eastern Europe, partisans were working in the black market and other subversive activities. The SS were clamping down on this very hard, making horrifying examples of the people involved. The SS were an elite squad of the German army, and it was based on the culture of an older Aryan Germany, the strongest, the purest, following the example of the Jesuit order, which was founded as the official guard of the Catholic Church. But even they were surprised at what was happening in Kiev.
I arrived to Kiev as a courier, and my colleagues made me sit down to play poker with them. And at once, a batman of my colleague came in and said, a young man came here in and selling very nice sausages in Ukrainian. Would you buy some nice peppered sausages? Oh, they've been long already in eating this boring military food. They bought some, all of them. I didn't want to buy because I just came from home and had enough supply food. A few days later, I've been called in by my superior and told me the signal asked from us a German-speaking war correspondent. I've been sent out, and on the street where I've been, have seen on lamppost 6 people hung, 4 men, 2 women, with a board on the chest written, "I've been executed through cannibalism." I took photos of them and made information about the story from the German military investigators. When I arrived back to my colleagues, I told them where I've been and about what happened there. They then realized, finally, they have eaten the same. So the men on the investigation made it clear the women invited on from the street housewives to sell them black market material, including meat, because it was very scarce, the food in Kiev. The men, when they arrived in this derelict house, when the center was, the men murdered, slaughtered these women. When they asked about the material-wise, they said the fair-haired women had much better taste than the brown-haired women. So then the colleagues of mine realized what they have eaten and been sick for many, many days after.
One night, the Russian freedom fighters blew up the SS headquarters in Kiev. The large aristocratic homes were destroyed and many SS were killed. The street where this happened then became known as the Street of Ruins. Of course, the German SS blamed the Jews and set about their revenge, taking them to their final destination up in the hills, men, women and children.
My bossman spoke German, and I asked him, would you more information about this rumor, the SS German execution squad? They executed around 40,000 Jewish, including the family. He, 3 weeks later, came to me and was very pleased mention he made a friend of a German sergeant who married a Hungarian ethnic girl, and he been connected with the SS execution squad. They executed around 40,000 Jewish, including the family. I asked him, would you make a time connect me to this with this sergeant? He made a time for me. In few more days, I took with me a big bottle of Badatsk apricot spirit and introduced to the sergeant. We sat down against the table and we started to talk various things and drank of the strong spirit. Then he told me what he knew about the case. The Germans captured Kiev. Then the SS chosen the best buildings of the old aristocrats' houses and settled in. One night, the partisans blew up these houses and buildings where these SS lived. The SS decided to collect all the Jews and punish. To secretly, they called, secretly is nonsense, they called all the Jewish and families in the center of Kiev following days for 5 o'clock in the morning, promised them housing and jobs, housing for the family as in barracks. The Jews collected the mentioned time, then the SS soldiers surrounded them and guided them to a valley where already Tommy guns, machine guns, nests been surrounded the valley, preparing for the slaughter of the Jews. For the signal, they started to shoot and kill whom they could. So they killed whom they could. Then, when after the signal, they blew up the surrounding valleys to bury the dead bodies. He, beside these, to ease his conscience, he told me he killed 100 Jews with his own hand using a revolver. And it was a terrible feeling for him, and wanted to ease his conscience with telling me these stories. Then he said, how can I face my wife when I go back after the war doing such a horror? I don't know how I was be able to face her. Just don't and can't believe. Then he lifted his hand and said, with these hands committed this terrible atrocity. And then we shook hands, and for me was the most terrifying feeling to shook hands with someone whose hand practically dripping from blood. This was my most awkward souvenir in my life ever I could remember.
By now, the SS were hell-bent on the final solution, to eradicate all the Jews of Europe, 11 million in all. The Nuremberg laws of 1935 saw to this. Poland was the first country to suffer, and other countries followed. The Jews were aware of what was happening, being taken to transit camps, no human rights, no human dignity.
I decided I'm going to see my mother soon, to go around with my batman, who was also my chauffeur, to villages and try to buy some geese, to knowing very well the situation in Budapest, not very pleasant regarding food. I stood there, and by the same time a group of Jewish men passed with a military escort by. And I looked around, and maybe I know some of them. I had many friends in Budapest. It looked they came from Budapest originally. While I've been watching, I recognized a fellow whom I knew. This called Reinitz, and he was the agent of a good friend of mine who had a big estate near to Budapest. He noticed me, recognized me. I winked him with my hand and asked him, where are you been taken? I had an opportunity, being a war correspondent, asked questions and demanded information for whatever I needed to know. I have a card for this to show. I told this sergeant, who was one of the leader of this group, to help me to see this fellow next day. The sergeant said to me, they're going to a transit camp called the Kisterenye transit camp. Thanked him very much, and then I asked my friend in the line, what time could I see you tomorrow? He told me if I come around morning, they are entitled to speak to strangers. I would like to speak to Mr. Reinitz. Then, in few minutes, he turned up. I told him I brought cigarettes for him, sandwiches, but I would like to move somewhere less exposed place. I don't want people should know about my arrival here. They are the Jewish, actually. So we went to a place, and he also introduced me a young lady, his girlfriend, whom I knew from the swimming, international swimming called Juji. I knew his girlfriend, Juji, since we've been many times on the swimming racing of the university team. Then I asked, when I passed to Reinitz all these, what I brought him to ease his situation, I asked him, what else could I maybe help you? He said, look, it is a very, very special thing what I would like to tell. I know is a Pope protected house in Budapest. I know exactly the place where it is. I wonder if you could take me there in your car. It is about 1.5 day travel from here. I said, oh, it's not a simple thing. I said, but not only me, but I have 2 friends whom I would like to take with me. And this made it much more irritating to me, because it's a very dangerous activity, because it was not allowed Jews to leave their places. And they've been under very tight security. Recently I took over the office with all the stamps and official papers is under my control. I can provide you with white armband for people, they are half Jewish, been proscribed. Also, I can provide you with stamped cards. So, in case people behold on checkpoints, I will come for you with my chauffeur and car. So I come 10 o'clock for you and be ready. Then we It was a hot summer night. We traveled with the car to the transit camp, and 10 o'clock we've been waiting another quarter an hour and more. It was very worrying, the situation. And at once I could hear from the slope under where we been with the car, big rattling of dishes, metal dishes, where people been sliding down from the slope. All the dogs realized there's something going on and made the biggest noise, which created very great worry in my chauffeur. Didn't know what it will be from this. And then the three fellows slided down and apologized. They had to cut the wire. It took time till they could make themselves free from the lager. Then I took out the white armbands and distributed also the identity cards, and soon as we jumped in the car and started to take the way towards Budapest. 3 times been stopped on the way, but luckily all the identity cards and been perfect, and we could carry on our journey to Budapest. All 16 or 17-year-old Hitler youth with guns equipped stopped all deserter military people on the streets. It was a very dangerous situation. I rang the bell and somebody came out. I explained the situation. These soldiers are entitled to get some protection to your house, and demanding to let them in. I went, changed, turned back with the car, and I know after the war, I made inquiries, all these people being protected and safe. I went back to my unit and made an excuse. I had to see my mother, and we've been hauled up, and this was my delay. I couldn't come do my duty in proper time.
Forced to wear white armbands for easy identification and made to labor for meager rations of food, it was becoming impossible for the Jews. People who were not already in camps were desperate to escape from the SS. All over Europe, people sympathized with the Jewish dilemma. There were safe houses, but it was a matter of finding them. Zoltan knew of someone who might be able to help. He believed every human life is important, and to save even just one from the SS is a life worth saving.
I had 2-day leaves from the army. I put on my extra outfit and went. It was some sunny summer day. Went along towards the Galliot, Hotel Galliot, along the River Danube. There I met a young lady whom I knew quite a time. She looked very depressed. I asked, why are you so depressed? It looks. Said, I'm very sorry worried about my mother. She is half Jewish status, and since the fascists came in, we don't know what will be the outcome of these. I said, very sorry. What you think? He said, could you help me? I said, I am in the army. I don't know how I could help you. He said, if you could maybe find a place where she could be hiding and people, they have nice feelings towards such problems, maybe they could help. I said, all right, I could try after all. I remembered I had friends in Zebegin, is opposite my studio place called Dömös, where I used to paint summertime. Sometimes I used to travel over the river to visit a family. The girl's name was Jenke Berceli. Berceli was a high-rank Hungarian officer. He was the uncle of hers. They've been very nice people. Berceli used to be on Olympics, participate, sword fighting. He was very famous too. So I told her, now listen, I have 2 days now, I could travel to Zebegin, which is only 50 kilometers away by train, and find out how are they willing probably help to an old lady. She said, oh, that'll be so kind, and when you get some information, please come and visit us and tell what you think, what could be done. I said, yes. I sat on a train and traveled to Zebegin, very unexpected to the family. Luckily, I met Jenke, was a kind young lady who'd been working in Budapest in an office beside, and we've been good friends, just like this. Many times I used to paint in Zebegin, a very nice place, an art center of many other artists there, very well-known place. So I used to travel over and paint and used to visit Jenke and the family, Berceli family, got a meal sometimes, and so on. So it was discussion also, so things about the arts and what I'm doing. So I traveled and managed to find Jenke at home with the mother, explained the situation. And they said they are very nice people. I would be very pleased if we could do some help for this lady. She said, discussed it with the mother. She said, yes, I am very willing to keep her here. I was very grateful and traveled back immediately and visited this lady and spoke to her mother. I begged her the following day she be ready, get all the whatever she has to take for longer stay in Zebegin. Next morning I visited again them and took her to the station and sat on the train. On the train been people, SS guards or whatever they were, used to check up the travelers in case Jewish are with them. They are not entitled to leave their own places wherever they live. Somebody living in Budapest was not allowed to leave the city at all, or any other places. They had to stay at. Being an officer outfit, being an officer, and all my necessary documents with me. She been not even try to she could travel without any observation or interfering or etc. My uniform was her security. Nobody, they didn't bother her. We arrived there, and she been very kindly received and given a little home, little room where she could withdraw. And Yankee told me she spoke to two of her friends, and they also very willing take two ladies for this purpose home. And it was an extreme nice feeling to me. Now instead one, now I could have three people. And when after the war, all the three people been perfectly safe, survival these terrible times.
With the Soviet war machine pushing the German front back, the Hungarian army was split between some officers joining the SS, while others opposed them. In Budapest, a new fascist leader had just taken over the country, causing Hungarian soldiers much confusion. As Zoltan was in charge of the 2nd Tank Division, he saw his chance to try to rescue his commanding officer, Admiral Horthy.
We've been pressed by the Soviet divisions back and back, more and more. In the Carpats, 3 tank division settled down. Carpats, very high mountains and forests, and I've been outside the forest watching. Kolozsvár is the city in Transylvania, being mined by the Russian. And it was a very strange sight. And you could see how they fly, and you could foresee where they're going to kill these people in the city. So I have foreseen the death of these citizens of this city. It was a terrible sight. The war destroyed every culture and everything. Just see the death for nothing. It's been vineyards in the neighborhood. We've been invited there to visit because the owner knew he have to run out, the enemy will take it over, will run out all the wine in any case. So we drank the best wine, what we could get. It was a lovely autumn time. And I am quite a good drinker, and it was very nice, the wine. So on end, it was getting dark. We went down to our unit. Unit was in the valley. And when we arrived there, we could hear very disturbing news. Namely, we've been informed that Buda actually been taken over by the fascists, the German military units, and our leader, Admiral Horthy, used to been taken captive by the SS. What can we do? Well, we've been discussing the possibilities of the recapture, maybe, Buda being a panzer division. At once I've been called to the chief of our panzer division, and he said, would you go, you are the war correspondent, go to the telephones and report whatever you can hear. So I went there. I was a bit tipsy still, and took the telephone and could hear all sorts of reports from various stations, because a camp wireless telephone is old-fashioned comparing the present these days, and it was just a simple telephone, and we didn't know where it came from. They said, some people said immediately go rescue Admiral Horthy. The other said to join to the SS organization and sign the document, you will be cooperate with the Germans. So nobody knew what to do. So I've been listening at time, and some 3 times been repeated one, would you immediately move the tank division and rescue Admiral Horthy? And these went very seriously. Still I didn't know where it came from. See, it's very seriously, with very serious voice. Selmazer, we sworn to Admiral Horthy, and it is the most normal thing. I was still tipsy a bit. I thought, why not? So I told my deputy, call the chief of the tank division. Don't know what high rank officer, of course. I have a report to him. And he came there, no, I said, what's the trouble? I said, I've been told immediately we should start our tank division and travel to rescue Admiral Horthy. Are you sure? I said, yes. This was the official information what been told to us, named the tank division. I said, all right. So he left and immediately mobilized all the tank division, which was about 150 tanks at all. And then I left the wireless myself and told my chauffeur, prepare, we have to go immediately. All the tanks starting to move, and we've been amongst them, of course, and at once we could see both sides. The German Tiger tanks took us between them and followed us, our movements, till 50 kilometers we could move forward, but then a division of German tanks stopped our way. All the officers had to get out from the tanks and been showed a lot of signature of Szálasi, who was the fascist leader, became few days ago of Hungary, and his signature was, we have to obey him, all officers have to sign the names. I've been thinking, my signature won't do any good or bad. I signed with the rest. And then this was our final activity. We had to leave and leave Admiral Horthy and his future. He'd been taken to Germany, unfortunate, and Szálasi took over the country.
Whilst on army leave, Zoltan went to Budapest to see his friend Zoltan Benku. As they sat and talked in Benku's house, they both decided that something must be done to show the West that the Hungarians were against the occupation. Zoltan suggested that they should blow up the newly erected statue of Gömbös, the fascist dictator of Hungary, especially as it was so ugly with no artistic merit whatsoever. Benku was very intrigued with Zoltan's idea, but they couldn't do anything as Zoltan had to go back to the army base camp.
Many weeks later, a local paper said that a previously unknown organization had placed dynamite around the statue and blew it up.
Years later, after the war, Zoltan, as president of the cultural section of Congress, went to Munich. Upon his arrival, he was told that his old friend Benku lived in the city. So Zoltan went to meet him, and they spoke of the idea about the statue, and that someone had actually carried out the deed. Benku smiled and said that it was he with the help of 2 other friends. In fact, for many weeks his mother didn't realize that the large, heavy object that she moved around the room when cleaning was in fact the dynamite used for the statue. In the 1980s, Zoltan, as president of the Hungarian freedom fighters, was still involved with various organizations promoting freedom culturally and artistically. He gave lectures in a number of cities all along the east coast of America, including New York and Washington, speaking about the suppression of Eastern European countries by the Soviets. In Washington, Zoltan was invited to the White House with other members of the Hungarian freedom fighters to advise on the situation in Eastern Europe. In a second meeting, Zoltan delivered the message that Hungary and Romania would act as a buffer between Russia and westernized countries, stopping possible war.
President Stetsko, he asked me, could I help to help a very famous Ukrainian writer, Moroz, who is in a Soviet very harsh labor camp in Siberia. I said, I tried to do my best. Have written to Harold Wilson, the Prime Minister of England, who wrote me back and said he connected already the Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, who is in a better condition with the Soviet government. After a time, few months, I received a visit of Mrs. Stetsko, and he told me Moroz been much better placed, his life condition, so also even has been allowed to write. She was very thankful what I have done for Moroz. Then he asked, what would I ask for all this what I have done? I said, thank you very much, I want really nothing, but if I could have this honor when he been released from this captivity, could I have a handshake with him to feel happy, showing my happiness his return to the free world. Later on, I've been again in New York. I had to make my speeches about the Hungarian suppression by the Soviet. One evening I sat and been watching television, and at once the television broadcaster said, it's been a famous Ukrainian poet released from Siberian captivity called Moroz, just arriving to New York. I've been watching television, I've seen him, Moroz, coming down from the plane. Straight away I phoned up the Ukrainian center and asked for Mrs. Stetsko to come to speak to me. Mrs. Stetsko came to the telephone and was very pleased when she found out I am in New York. She said it will be tomorrow a big meeting for honor of Moroz on the place where the Ukrainian gather. Would you come along? I will introduce you Moroz, who will be very, and tell him you've been the person who helped him to get in a easier way of camp. Then we went to this place which been given to Ukrainian by the New York state. There I have seen, when we arrived, about 5,000 people. In the middle stood Moros holding a large, big speech about his captivity and his plans. I have seen, when he finished, Mrs. Tetsko went to him and showed my direction with her hand. Then Moros, it looked, she tried to talk, he'd been talking to Moros. Then Moros and Mrs. Tetsko came to me. Moros embraced me and very great, happy way he expressed his gratitude to me. Then we shook hands, and then my colleague took photos of it. When we got home, I took my photo roll to a developer, a film photo developer, and we have seen the handshake, but unfortunate without hands, the heads. This was unfortunate, the tragedy for me.
In Hungary today, near Budapest, is a new university, Laki Telik Nép Főiskola, the People's University. It was built about 4 years ago by a Canadian construction company with financial aid and support from other Hungarians around the world. Judith Lévy, the head of all departments and organizer of all the lecturers, which range from philosophers, writers, doctors of science to religious leaders, teach to a very high standard and discipline, incorporating modern, westernized, practical approach. And within the grounds of the university, there's a museum which houses art, literature, and sculpture by Hungarians from around the world. Up to 1,654 artists, as established in the lexicon by Ernest Jermeshai Karshaws and Leslie L. Kernu, had left Hungary for political reasons during the Soviet occupation. The museum's aim is to collect and show the younger and future generations' Hungarian art that may have been lost entirely or dispersed around the world forever. This museum is the only one of its kind in the world for Hungarian art. The director of the museum, Ilona Sabu, informs Hungarian artists in exile of her collection. She achieves this with great dedication and a passionate belief, which captures the imagination of the artists who donate their work from around the world. The founder of Laki Telik and owner, Sándor Lezsák, first had his vision of preserving and teaching Hungarian culture many years ago. Winning a cash prize for first place in a competition for literature and saving his salary from teaching brought the dream into reality. As the Soviets still ruled the country, Sándor wanted to be independent of any ruling body, so as to have total and free control of the university. There certainly was not going to be any Soviet propaganda taught in Nép Főiskola. With the proud support of Mrs. Sándor Lezsák, who is actively involved as director in the day-to-day running of the Laki Telik, she has been a great support for her husband. Sándor still believes strongly in his dreams and passionately believes that the people of Hungary, indeed all the people of Hungary, whether Christian, Muslim or Jewish, shall have an equal opportunity for education. His vision for the Laki Telik should carry the country into the next century, bringing hopes and dreams to all the people.